Hi friends, I hope you're all doing well. I'm so glad to be able to share this spiritual practice with you. As we begin, I invite you to get comfortable. Take a moment to feel your groundedness on the earth, the life flowing into you through your breath, and the awareness in your own consciousness. Relax, still your body and mind, and open yourself to Spirit in whatever way is helpful for you. Feel free to pause the video until you feel ready to dive into the work of today's practice. And then when you're ready, invite images into your mind of the world as you see it now. Don't try to control or judge those images. Just let them flow into your awareness. Note them for a moment, and then release them to make space for the next image. When you feel that you've done this enough, take a few moments to collate your images into a one-sentence story that reflects how you feel about the world now. You can write the story down in your journal or on your phone, or you can just let the words flow through you. But once again, don't judge. Don't judge your story. Don't try to fit it into any external standard to which you may be tempted to conform. Just allow the story to emerge. And then when you've got your one-sentence story in front of yourself, ask yourself what you would want to change about your story of the world. Where do you fit into the story? What impact does the story have on your life? And what would you prefer to be different? Sit with your thoughts and feelings for a moment, and then invite the Divine Spirit to ignite your imagination as we begin to explore what a different story might look like. And this prayer may be helpful to you. Spirit of God, fill my eyes with a vision of your dream for my world. Fill my mind with the wisdom to see how that dream may become a reality. And fill my being with the courage and strength to do what it takes to live in your country, even as I live in the ordinary world. So may it be. A few years ago, one of the leaders in the church where I worked turned 49. When I congratulated her, she informed me that she was now in her Jubilee year and that she intended to make the most of it. I was tempted to ask her what debts she was planning to cancel or what property that she had bought she would be returning to the original owner, and what slaves she was hoping to liberate. But I opted instead just to smile. We speak of the Jubilee now as nothing more than a significant celebration. It's often associated particularly with monarchs. I can still remember the celebration of Queen Elizabeth II's golden or 50-year Jubilee in 2002. Yet in spite of the biblical origins and the meaning of this term, few Jubilees are anything more than a reason for a big party. I don't remember any cancelled debts or freed slaves in 2002. I find it sad that we would so easily strip such potentially world-changing events of their justice-making potential. It reminds me of a creative planning retreat I was in a few years ago. Clergy and lay leaders had gathered from various churches in the same area for 2 days of planning our worship and preaching themes for the next year. At one point, we were considering a set of scripture readings that had a strong emphasis on justice. And so I suggested that we set aside a month to focus on living justly in our daily lives. But one of my clergy colleagues objected. People won't cope with focusing on justice for that long, he said. I'm always surprised when people who claim to follow Jesus resist the call to live justly, as at least 4,400 pastors did in 2018 when they signed John MacArthur's anti-social justice proclamation. My guess is that there are probably at least two reasons why people of faith are tempted to dismiss justice as an integral part of their faith. For those in power, of course, to embrace the call for social justice is to give up their place of power and privilege, which few people are actually capable of doing. But for the average person of faith, I suspect most of us struggle with justice because the issues seem so big and overwhelming, and it takes everything we've got just to survive. There's so very little energy left to try and make a difference in the world. But living justly, living as true Jubilee people in the biblical sense, doesn't have to be overwhelming. And it doesn't have to mean changing the world on a global scale. The most effective justice work is when we each make small but significant changes to our attitudes and actions in order to be more fair to the people around us. It's that simple. And it can make our lives so much richer at the same time. In Matthew's Gospel, chapter 25, and from verses 31 to 46, Jesus told his famous parable of the sheep and the goats. He pictures a time of judgment when all people will be gathered to stand before God's throne. And to those who are called the goats, Christ gives a list of things they failed to do: visiting him when he was sick and imprisoned, feeding him and clothing him, giving him water. And they're confused and they ask when they ever saw Christ in those situations, to which he responds, "Whatever you did not do for one of the least of my sisters and brothers, you did not do for me." Likewise, the sheep are praised for doing all these things. And they ask when they witnessed Christ in need, and they are told, "Whatever you did for one of the least of my sisters and brothers, you did for me." The point of the parable is not to force us to go out of our way to address large justice causes, although of course some of us may be equipped and motivated to do so. The point rather is for us to be aware of the needs of those closest to us, and for us to do whatever little things we can do to ease their pain. As we've seen, Jesus used the festival of the Jubilee to describe what he called God's reign. Now in this parable, he invites us to participate in Jubilee living, in doing things that liberate, heal, uplift, and strengthen those around us. They don't have to be grand gestures. They can be very easy and simple acts that just bring some joy and goodness into the life of another person. To be a Jubilee person, or to be someone who embodies the values and priorities of God's country, is to be someone who is fair and kind and generous in our dealings with others. That's it. It can mean buying a meal for a friend who is depressed, or comforting a crying child. It can be taking the time to listen to someone's story, or putting your phone away for a moment to give a loved one your undivided attention. It can be signing online petitions through sites like Avars, or participating in simple challenges through Global Citizen. Whenever we treat someone with respect, whenever we protect their safety or dignity, whenever we show them kindness or celebrate who they are, we embody the spirit of the Jubilee. And the best part of all this is that our lives are enriched when we make Jubilee living a habit. When we choose consciously and intentionally to live as Jubilee people, we become more deeply connected with our own inner divinity, with the people around us, with the world, and with the Divine Spirit. And all it takes is to be aware of what we can do in our daily lives to liberate, empower, celebrate, and encourage one another. And of course, we need to include ourselves in that as well. Jesus said that Isaiah's Jubilee prophecy had been fulfilled in him. Well, that can be true for us too. That prophecy can be fulfilled in each one of us. The Spirit of the Lord is on us so that we can be those who proclaim freedom and liberation and healing. And as we do that, as we proclaim it, as we live it, as we share it, then we know the joy of living fully and vibrantly as Jubilee people every single day. Return to that space of groundedness and stillness that you were in at the start of this practice. Allow a few moments for this reflection to sink into your heart, and take note of anything that stood out for you, that challenged you or inspired you. Now go back to the story you wrote in the beginning of this practice. Compare it to the dream that we've just been talking about. And now I encourage you to write another story about the world. This time, make it a little longer, maybe 1 or 2 paragraphs, and describe the world as you would like it to be. Keep in mind how you see the world now as expressed in the short story you wrote earlier, and also keep in mind the dream that we've explored in today's reflection. And try to make this new story that you're writing now realistic and practical, but also hopeful and filled with possibilities. And again, you can pause the video if you need a while to do this. And when you're done writing your new story about the world, make sure to keep it somewhere close to you so that you can return to it throughout the week, so that you can allow it to fill your heart and mind with its inspiration. And now, as we prepare to return to the practical details of living, take a moment to identify one thing you can do to live as if your hopeful story of the world was a reality now. Think of one thing that can move you a little closer to making this dream real for you, and commit to doing that thing as consistently as you can through the week. See yourself living in this new world of your story. Imagine making the habits and feelings and attitudes of your story the way you actually live now, even though your world, the one you're really in right now, may be very different from the one you've been imagining. And now go into your week to live in God's country, even as you live in our ordinary world.